Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Transgender Show. I'm your host, Emily. Tonight, I'm very excited to welcome Mia Mason to the stage here. Mia is a retired veteran from the Army and Navy who, during her 20-year career, transitioned and bravely fought off legal discrimination within the armed forces. She then ran for Congress in the 2020 election cycle to become the first nationwide LGBTQ veteran to win a federal election primary. She is currently serving as the LGBTQ chair for the Maryland Democratic Party. Mia has spoken for the community from within the military and on the public stage about the legal discrimination she and countless trans figures have experienced in the workplace. Everyone, welcome to the show, Mia Mason. Hello.
Hi there. Hey. Hi, everyone.
Welcome to the Transgender Show. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on and share your story with us.
I know it's a long story, so let's get to it.
Okay. I love it. I love the enthusiasm. First off, for everybody's baseline, how do you identify and what are your pronouns?
Well, I am she, and I really don't even tell people that I'm trans, which is kind of like, it's not like a passing thing. It's more of a, confidence thing. I know there's a lot of people in the gender fluid community that love who they are, and I support them. I'm used to be one of those people, but I finally have found who I was and stayed with that.
Oh, that's wonderful. I like to start when we get into your story here with the easy question, one of my favorites. How did you choose your name?
Well, my handwriting sucks. And one of the things is that I was maybe going to be Danielle. It was a nickname I used to have in high school. It was like a pen name I had. But Mia was just short for my actual legal name. So it was even easier. And I was like, let's just get rid of the MIC and make it an A, since it always looked like an A anyway, like it really belonged there. Because my mom, if she told me one day that, if I was born a girl, she was going to name me Michelle, one of the most popular names in the 80s. And I was like, I can't do that. I'm individual, I'm unique, I love myself. And if you look it up in Spanish, Mia kind of like is part of that love connection. So that's how I came up with that name. And it took a long, hard process. I was in the middle of a war and a GCOP in Sawari, Afghanistan, where I picked out my name, where I started the transition to actually, fully identify as myself.
Wow, so you had a lot going on when you made the decision to transition.
A lot of preparation too, back during my time, we had AOL and dial-up internet, and cable internet was just coming around, and I was researching what transgender is, she-male, and transsexual, and everything else became more popular on the internet. And most people were like, it's always porn, and I was like, quotation marks, I'm looking for this with this and this medical help. And it led me to a group called T-Valves out there where I was living in Tennessee, and they were super helpful in providing real information about a transition process. So with all of that knowledge and their help, I was able to do that, where every doctor in the state of Kentucky and Tennessee just said, no, do not come back. Don't even think about visiting me again, and just shut the door on me. So, and that was even hard because the military was in a gray zone. So while my boobs were developing, I was being seen for, a guy having boobs. They're like, well, we can remove them. And I'm like, no, but can you make them bigger? And then they were like, you need to leave. So there was a lot of that in the very beginning of my transition time.
That's disappointing. I'm glad you were able to find a group to at least find the information, but that's a lot of hurdles to run into early on.
Oh, it was. And the thing is that because of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, back during the military, you couldn't come out. There was no being open You could do things off duty, but you had to be like a secret coming back onto the base, or not even try to do it. Do it at home, take it off before you go back to the work
Yeah.
place. And that was very difficult because, like, even for me, it was a slow transition where it started out with the socks, the shoes, the pants, underwear, bra, and then finally got to the shirts and everything else. But by then, I was coming to Maryland, where I live now, far away from the hate and despair of Kentucky, Tennessee, and Virginia, where I grew up. Because, I was then telling my parents that, hey, when I come out of the military, this is who I'm going to be. But, the hardest thing was when I was in the military was the don't ask, don't tell, because the hardest thing is that it didn't include me at all. And because of my transgender status, I only came out to a couple people. But, it was not like a standing ovation
Hmm.
at all. It was more, sexual harassment, fatigue, and despair and depression. Trying to transition secretly in the military while being active duty. And I did what I could.
Yeah, that's such a tough situation to be in because you'd actually already started your medical transition with hormones while you were serving, and you're in a place where you're serving your country, and yet everybody is telling you that you have to stay in the closet as complete as possible. That's a hell of a predicament to be in, the proverbial rock and hard place. So going back just slightly, when was it that the term transgender, as you knew it at the time, applied to you? When did you realize that that was the identity that made sense for you?
Well, it made sense to me when I was like 13 years old and didn't know what gay was or anything else. But when I started like looking it up in the 2000s, um, I had more girlfriends than anything. I didn't have a single guy friend. High school, college, or even in the military, I always had plenty of girlfriends and everything else. And we tried getting me to be who I am today. And I took it to seriousness and I said, look, I think this is who I was supposed to be. So that happened between 2000 to 2001. And unfortunately, 9/11 happened. And then I ended up at war.
Hmm.
So I had to put everything on the back burner and be the guy to save the country. But, I had to sacrifice my family, my loved ones, and go fight a war. And then after that, go fight another war in 2003 for the Iraq War. And then by the time I turned around, we were having issues in Iraq and Afghanistan and had to go back. So for 13 years, I ended up being stuck in a war zone,
Hmm.
serving our country.
Yeah. So you're trapped in this situation where you can't be yourself, yet
Yeah,
you've already come to the understanding that you have to be yourself, and you've begun the process. What a incredible conflict internally that must have been.
it was because when I finally had like proper broadband, it was like 2009, and I started doing advanced research. And I was like, I'm switching from the Navy to the Army, and I'm trying to prove to myself I am masculine, I am
Hmm.
this and everything else. And I get through combat training and everything else, and I'm like, I'm still who I am. It doesn't matter. I had this job before I came into it, and I'll have this job when I leave it. I'm just here to fill a slot and be the best of who I can be. I
Hmm.
have to keep up two standards of my life, her and him.
Yeah.
But one of us has to eventually give up. And I remember like a lot of legislation while I was getting prepared to go to war again in 2010. Like, can I start my transition? Will the end of Don't Ask, Don't Tell protect me? And it didn't. So there I am in a combat zone, taking my hormones, maintaining both male and female standards, going out the wire on patrols and missions up and down mountains throughout Afghanistan. And, like, here I am, and I'm like, everybody else is like, yay, you can be gay, you can be bi, you can be lesbian. But here I am, and I can't be anything
Mm-hmm.
still. I was locked in. And then eventually, I just still kept that secret, and I went through my second Army deployment.
Mm-hmm.
I've had, like, 3 in the Navy, but that's on a ship. Being out there ground pounding is different. And bringing back people alive and not dead is super important. In the Navy, it was easy to push buttons and blow people up. But in the Army, you're actually the one doing the blowing up.
Mm-hmm.
So, so it was even more stressful and everything else. And then on top of me wanting to transition, it led into a lot of despair. But one of the benefits is because we were so isolated, everything was gender neutral.
Mm-hmm.
We just needed a place to shower, sleep, eat, rest, go back to fighting. And that's where we were successful in.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it didn't include us, I was hoping that the time I got out of active duty, maybe something would change. And even when I came to the DC National Guard, first time I got on the bus to go to, Fort Belvoir further in processing, they're like, well, if you're transgender, I need to know right now. And I'm like, I just looked away from the sergeant first class, and I was like, oh yeah, just ignore my tits.
I really
Yeah,
even that late, and it sounded like at that point they kind of had something. Do you feel that admitting that you were trans would have been a dismissal?
absolutely. Back in 2013 and early 2014, absolutely. I would have been out. And the funny thing is that even a year later, we normally have a yearly medical review. But I started actual legal hormone transition through the VA in Washington, D.C. And the doctors went through my medical records and saw that in the VA I was Mia, and in the Army I was this other person
Mm-hmm.
who came into the military in 1998. They're like, wait a minute, this doesn't add up. How are you this person from 2010? And we have this person from 1998. And yeah, they put two and two together and read me a little line saying, hey, we're going to kick you out based on this transgenderism and transsexual stuff. And I was sort of like, okay, I think we're going to have something going on here. If you're going to kick me out, you do it like within the next 6 months. And I stood there in front of my commander, and she was like, I'm from DC. I know all the politics and everything else. Nothing's going to change this. You're getting kicked out when I want to kick you out. And I said, okay. And this happened like on my birthday in June on a drill weekend during Pride Month. It was it was like dominoes, like falling over, like a room full of them, and all you hear is. And this is like a huge drill floor and everything else. I go out there, I start using an emotional support animal because I have no clue what's going on with my life right now.
Yeah.
And then the DSM changed in August to allow transsexuals and transgender to be accepted. So they used an outdated medical reference because they filed the paperwork in September. She wanted me out by September. Well, the policies changed. And then I remember when I finally was being told that I was going to be discharged, and I already had surgery set up so that I could become who I am.
Mm-hmm.
I had my, GRS set up so that I could legally be a female. And I went through surgery. Everything was okay. And then I changed my gender documents and my name documents because that's, I was like, if I'm being kicked out, I'm going to go ahead and start changing everything right now.
Let's go. Let's just get it all done then. If this is, yeah, this is over.
So,
That was the thing holding me back. So let's go. I love
yeah,
it.
yeah. If I'm getting kicked out, I might as well get a benefit of getting my name changed and everything else and having the military do it for me. And I turned it all in October after I had my surgery. I said, here I am. I'm legally female. we're good to go. Here's the court documents. And it was, then November, because I had to wait for the judge to sign it all off. And, it was like 17 pages of paperwork about this thick. I still have it to this day. But I had to have like 20 copies of all of this stuff to get up my driver's license, my passport, my driver's ID, my TWIC, my contractor's ID card, and my military ID card all changed. And I was working for the Coast Guard at the time too, and that was easy. But that's another story.
Mm.
But the National Guard was like, okay, you still need to come in as a guy. Cut your hair, wear the male uniform until we actually discharge you. And in November and December, guess what happens in Washington, D.C.? We have Christmas galas, balls, parties, everything else. So here I am, hating life. Like, I'm putting on some weight because I haven't exercised a lot, trying to fit into a very tight military male uniform. So I basically kind of cut the sides, put the pants on, put the jacket on, binded my boobs, and went to my last drill for an event in December. And then they finally kicked me out a week later. So they brought me in on a weekday and said, here's your discharge paperwork. And they kicked me out officially back in November. So then I had to repay 2 months of drill pay, which was even more bad.
Yeah.
Because then I was ordered in twice as a male, had to pay that back. And then the next week, Honorable Secretary Ash Carter came on TV and says that we will allow transgender servicemen. This weekend we'll have an announcement by the president. And then President Obama came on and said that we will allow our transgender service members. Everybody in the National Guard, active duty, and everywhere else, all were on Christmas break. And I'm calling everyone in D.C. all the way into the new year to get a hold of my attorney. I went back in January, sat down with my attorney, who was like, a couple months ago, you didn't want to be in at all because you were hating your life and drinking like a fish and putting on weight like a freaking, potato sack. I was like, yeah, but now I can stay in. Let's fight this. Let's stay in. My hair started growing out again and everything else because, I had to pick it and everything else. It was horrible to be a dude. It just wasn't me at all. It was a nightmare.
Yeah.
But we then began the process of basically taking on the DC National Guard and the nice way, suing the president and suing everybody else to say that I should be allowed. But going through the Pentagon and the National Guard headquarters and everything else was a super slow process to get me back in.
Mm-hmm.
And that took over a year and a half.
And I'd love to get into that a little bit more. First, I wanted to ask you a little bit of a follow-up. You had mentioned when you switched over from the Navy to the Army, you were in that mindset of trying to prove that you were masculine, and and still trying to hold back the fact that you are transgender. Do you feel that is some of what was the initial impetus for you to join the military in the first place?
Yeah, it wasn't like when I joined the military, like when I was young, or like switching from just the Navy to the Army, because there's like two different parts there, because my parents tricked me into going into the military. And then when I switched over from the Navy to the Army, they were trying to send me on to another deployment that I didn't want to go to. And I was like, if I'm going back to Afghanistan, I want to do it where I'm actually on the ground being effective in helping them versus, bombing them from above. That's why I switched over to the Army. I wanted to do more and try to prove to myself that I was who I was or wasn't. And I proved to myself that I just needed to be who I was on the inside, not the shell that I was molded into and adapted to by the military to just say, go rock 'em, sock 'em, kill 'em.
So,
just, yeah,
so after all this happens and you're discharged and it
yeah,
takes a year to get through everything, you're able to get back in, correct?
yeah. It was a hefty penalty because I had to do everything remotely because we were in a deep gray zone. More than just trying to keep it a secret, I had to legally prove that I was complete. And then have all the paperwork to complete that. And they came out with all these exceptions to policies. They passed down the policies and everything else and tried to categorize me, label me. And I'm enlisted at the time. I'm not an officer where I can just turn in paperwork and it's taken for granted. Love me, I'm transitioning, help me. I'm enlisted. Go pound sand,
Mm-hmm.
come back to me when, you've completed a heart shaped circle. It was a lot harder being on the enlisted side of the field trying to prove that, one, you're transgender, two, you're a woman, and then three, these are the legal documents I need. An officer would just turn it all in and, they put in the GS14 God code and you are who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And that took over a year and a half to do it. And in return, I, got a bonus from joining the DC National Guard,
Okay.
and I had to repay that as well. So there went $50,000. And then plus the 3 years of drill that I was doing, I had to repay that as well. So that included any type of educational bonuses I was using through the VA. It
Oh,
ended up,
was this was when you were discharged? You had
yeah,
to pay that all
yeah,
back? Okay.
yeah, I had to start paying it all back. So my VA benefits went from, a couple $100 or a couple $1,000 a month to zero.
Mm-hmm.
And it, like, just 4 years ago, no, 3 years ago, because we've been in the pandemic for two, I finally repaid $80,000 back to the government, to the VA, for me to get back into the military. And
Oh,
that's what I didn't want to see happen to other families
mm-hmm.
or other people who were trying to transition.
Yeah.
And that's why I fought so hard during that time from 2015 to 18 to get people to accept us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what was the main motivation then? I mean, they have just I'm just gonna say because I don't have another word right now. They've just completely crapped on you through this whole thing,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
you're out. You are able to transition. You're able to complete your transition, so you get to be who you are.
Yep.
I can understand wanting to fight them a bit. Why did you fight to get back in, and what did it mean for you once you were back in on the inside there?
Well, for me, it was about setting the example, being prideful, being loyal, being honorable, showing moral courage. That's who I was. I was that person that you could always rely on, have that trust with to get the job done. And I had tons of skill sets from not only the Navy, but the Army and everything else. And I still wanted to put it to practical use because I figured that if, we were ever to go to war again, these new soldiers coming in are going to be, like, what do I do? And they need the actual proper training. And I wanted to stay in to show them that. And the thing is that we were in such legal limbo, everybody was kicked out. Everybody was, switched around and they were like, oh, we're just going to put you over here as if you were Chelsea Manning or somebody else. We're just going to keep you cast away. We're not actually going to put you in a unit so that other people know who you are.
Hmm.
We're going to tuck you away in a little office because, like, no one wanted me. The only people that wanted me were the people who were trying to protect my civil rights.
Yeah.
And they took me in. They gave me a career as, helping them in their paralegal field so that when they had other patients with HIV um, or were part of the LGBT community, they had a voice and they could come and talk to me about it in DC.
Mm-hmm. So at that point, were you able to do that? What you had hoped for to provide sort of a leadership role for some of the the newer cadets or the newer folks coming in?
Only a few small amount,
Mm.
because my contact was limited.
Yeah.
But, this is where then, I got into that, how can I say, your 18-year mark. And that was in 2018. And then I took a political avenue. But something happened a year before then. Because the thing is that I met some wonderful people and I got into the news about getting back into the DC National Guard. And the thing is that because I lost my pension, because I lost so much, I was trying to fight to get back in to be proud of who I was and fight for my country. And I wanted to do it again. And then they told me I couldn't because we were waiting for the policies and everything else to be on the Hill to debate it all. And then we had to switch offices from President Obama to President Trump. And I had to prepare myself to do that inauguration. So we had to do all the legal paperwork for it. And even today, like several years later, I finally got an award again for helping them out in the inauguration from the Air Force. Because we were working with the Air Force, the Army, the Navy, everybody, in order to successfully protect the incoming president at the time, which was Donald Trump. But we knew that wasn't going to be good news.
Yeah.
We were expecting Don't Ask, Don't Tell 2.0. We were expecting to be kicked out. And then when things started leaking after the inauguration about what he wanted to do with service members like myself, I raised the red flag to everybody. And I was lucky enough to get on NBC Nightly News the night he tweeted to basically saying, according to my generals, my mirror, and my religious zealots who tell me that transgender people shouldn't exist because of the Bible, I don't want them serving in the military at all. So here I am, and I become Jane Doe again. Trying to make sure that, what doesn't happen to me happens to people at Fort Meade, Fort Detrick, Fort Campbell, Fort Drum, any naval base, any air station, any port, because the people that did come out as transgender are going to face a hardship. And the people who are thinking about coming out, the president just condoned them. And this led into a very dark time in my life because I didn't know what to do. Couldn't make heads or tails of any day.
Mm-hmm.
There was so much going on that I felt like if I've lost my family now, I've lost my job, I've lost my career, I think I need to end my life. And I was like, I'm still repaying like $80,000. I'll never get out. I'll never see a light of day. I'll never own a home. And it was a dark time with that president in office.
Yeah.
And this is where I felt like at that time I needed to just get to my 20-year mark, get another year in, and then pray to God we don't go to war with somebody.
See, you got lucky there. I'm just absolutely flabbergasted by the fact that you were essentially wrongfully terminated. I don't know if there was a way that they could kind of prove, I guess, because that was the policy at the time.
They illegally kicked me out,
Mm-hmm.
and they backdated everything. They tried to back pay me,
Mm-hmm.
but I had to repay that back pay
Yeah, and
until all the
that's what
paperwork got straightened
shocks.
out. But
Yeah,
it was horrible.
that's what
Yeah.
shocks me. The fact that you were still on the hook for that money when. Yeah, that doesn't make any sense to me. So I was able to interview Lieutenant Colonel Bree Fram of Space Force, and she had been in the military, through a lot of this same stuff. Of course, an enlisted officer, she had a very different experience. She was talking about how what Trump had said didn't have a lot of effects that she saw, like that the structure of the military kind of stayed the same and sort of like kept on BAU, even though he'd put that out there. Did you see a lot of Was it very different for you, considering that you were lower on the totem pole, you were directly in DC, the National Guard's a little different as far as the branch?
I think the best story I can share is that of my friends. All right. The one friend was over in Germany. She was kicked out for basically having a mental disorder because of her LGBT status and disclosing it. They
Hmm.
started saying that she wasn't performing good, she wasn't doing this and everything else. The other friend that I know was sexually assaulted and abused, and was said, "Hey, we need to send you to another unit. This isn't a good fit for you because this is too much of a man club." And we're all like junior enlisted, and here I am working with generals every day saying this isn't right. You need to protect them. You need to get them out of harm's way and get them into a culture that accepts them, because there were so many people that were through Trumpism, that didn't want to accept us, who were on the front lines, who were on the support lines and saying, yeah, I'm going to do whatever the president says. If I have to kick you out because you're a poor performer, or you're not meeting the male standards, my standards, you're out.
Hmm.
And the difference is, as an officer, it's the attaboy club. Here's my paperwork, here I am. And you're mainly working with contractors and senior officers and senior enlisted.
Mm.
You're not dealing with the junior enlisted who has to say, Mother, may I? May I go see the doctor? May I go see the nurse? May I go see a psychiatrist? May I start my transition? May I do this? May I do that? That's the enlisted side of the thing. The officers are like, hey, I want to do this because this is who I am. Here's my paperwork. I'm going to start my transition.
Yeah.
Completely different for the enlisted people.
That's so
It was
unfortunate.
more of a detriment.
Yeah, that's so unfortunate. What we'll get into later after the break. Probably we'll dive a little bit more into the things that you were able to do after that point once you got back in and you got into these things and became more of an advocate. Going back to when you came out, you were in the military. When you started your transition, you were in the military. When did you start to come out to people like family and friends? You mentioned earlier that you had a couple people that you talked to. I had assumed that was within the military, but paint me a picture of what that entire process was like for you.
Well, because we were in such a gray zone, the people that I did come out to, we were in the middle of, nowhere in Afghanistan, middle of the night, towers, nobody to talk to. And, one of the girls asked, like, why are your boobs bigger than mine? And I said, well, that's kind of a long story. And she says, well, we have a long time tonight and nobody's trying to kill us. So I kind of told her what it was. And I was like, well, I'm still, I think you could be this as well. My little gator was going off. So, if she actually transitioned to him, more hats off to her.
Oh wow.
But I don't know. We're still Facebook friends, but I don't see any social media posts. But during my time of transition, I didn't have any social media posts until I came out. And then even then, the large group of people who unfriended and the people who did friend were all new to me. And that's just because I became into a new state of mind. Now, as far as like the medical community, they were very accepting. I was lucky enough to be in a place where I was going through adult behavioral health. Um, and we renamed basically me wanting the transition because they had this service called Military One Source, which was very LGBT friendly, where you could go talk to any doctor, even if it was military or anything else. And we learned to develop through our sessions that we would talk about my transition as professional development time.
Hmm.
So that so that we could outline my transition. And I even learned more medical terms from the doctor about how to actually successfully transition, and that it wasn't an overnight process, and then basically make goals so that I could complete everything within a 10-year period. And he says if you were like female to male, we'd be looking at like, 4 years. And I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. I didn't know like this was like that powerful. I says, yeah, but you have a longer road, you have a longer journey. So sit back and enjoy it. But, if you actually come out, do expect to be kicked out.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why, even when I left Fort Campbell, I still remember that doctor. I can't disclose who he is, but, it was the best time to actually go see this person who was accepting of who I was before I even legally changed my name or anything.
Mm.
Yeah.
So was there a specific thing or event, something you came across in research or whatever, that was that catalyst for you, that thing that cracked your egg?
I think it was just a buildup, from the first time that I was truly happy being who I was. And it was, I was with all my girlfriends. This was like when I was like in my teens, and we were in church, having a sleepover and everything else. And, I dressed up as my mom, and I wanted to stay that way. And even my girlfriend at the time, she was in a different city and everything else, was like, I don't think that's possible, but if it is, I think it's pretty cool. And, she was even proud of seeing me on TV like several times and was like, you go, girl. I'm very proud that, I got to be part of your life. Because the thing is like, I used to do dance, I used to do ballet. And I was told that I can't do ballet. I have to do this tap dance. I have to do this because of who I was, because of what was between my legs, the thing I hated the most about me and my body, the way I identified, and the way that I wasn't. It was an attachment I didn't need or want. It was something that hurt me, and I wanted to see it removed as much as possible, as quick as possible, and to have it for an extra 10 years was horrible.
Mm.
Um, you know, and got things into places that it shouldn't have been, and, that's life. But I'm successful where I am now, and I love who I am, and other people love me for the work that I continue to do for them today.
Mhm.
Yeah.
How did it go with your family? At what point in your transition did you start to talk to them about it, and what was their response?
I think when I came out to my in laws first, because they were in the medical field,
Hmm.
they basically told me to wait till my parents were dead.
Ooh.
Because, growing up in Virginia, it was kind of still a Confederate state, and they wouldn't believe it. Well, my grandparents were all passed away, so that was a benefit there. But as far as my parents, they still had 30, 40 years on their life. I couldn't wait. I was, about to turn 30, and I was like, I need to make a life change here. I need to be me. And with that help, we successfully, when I came back in 2015 to my family, my dad accepted me. It took a while, but, everything got fully turned over. And, my mom accepted me. She loved me and everything else. My stepdad just didn't love me. He was the discipline in the family and always saw me as my dead name. He always treated me as my dead name. Even at the funeral of my mother, I was dead named. So it was very hard 2021, knowing that my mom was going to pass and that I only got to see her twice out of like 10 years between visits because of, him holding me back from seeing my mom.
Did you have anybody that supported you? You did mention that doctor
Yeah.
there at the camp, but or at the base. But did you have anybody else that supported you in a way that you weren't expecting?
Yeah, I found friends here in DC. I met like Christian Beck, who became like a mentor model for us. I met like people like Allison Mack, you know, countless others like Karen K. Holmes. They're LGBT veterans as well. And I was like, wow, I want to be like you. How can I like believe in what I'm telling others, my dark inner story about what happened to me, and shine a light upon it? And that's where I started my advocacy by working, and getting to know them. So we, meet up at Walter Reed. We'll meet up at DC Armory. We'll do pride speeches in order to tell people exactly what it was like what we're talking about right now about my transition and my life story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
As you've moved through your journey from the moment you started it through to where you are today, did your goals shift? Did you have things that you had put the marker on for a goal that at some point didn't become important, was no longer important to you, or things that became more important as you moved along your steps?
I think there was a lot of that. I think one of the biggest turning points is that I was in a bunker one day with a bunch of other dudes. And I was there like every day because we were getting attacked like 3 times a day. And I was like, I think one day I'm going to die in this bunker.
Mm.
So, like, on the third day of having like this real deja vu, real life, like crystal city skies, like, beautiful day, I decided not to go to the bunker. The time lieutenant my lieutenant tells me to get up and go to the bunker, it blows up in front of me. And that put a big perspective on life, how valuable and minuscule it was. To basically do everything I can to stay alive, to help others, to share my voice, to uh, make it mean something besides a normal 9 to 5. Because from 2001 to now, I've only been on the dishing end of hurting people in other countries and everything else, but there's people within me, myself and my family and my loved ones that I've missed, that I've, had to sacrifice that time with, and I want it back. But even when I came back to America, they were like, we can't accept you. And that made it even harder and darker for me
Mm-hmm.
to be who I was. But I stood up and I said, I have to be who this is. If not, I can't live here anymore. I'm in debt up to my eyeballs. I owe this for medical bills. I'm divorced now. I'm this, I'm that. I'm about to be homeless. I've just had my car taken away from me on my birthday, and I have to get to work. I'm drinking a bottle of wine a day. Zoloft medicine isn't helping. It's making it worse. And I wanted to put an end to it all. So from the time that I was almost killed in a bunker to the time I wanted to almost kill myself, that put a lot of perspective into my life to then say, I have to make a change. And it took a revolver to do that. And we were having the riots of Freddie Gray at the time in Baltimore, so it was really unsafe. And luckily for me, my dad gave me the wrong size bullets. If not, I wouldn't be here. And then I just started saying, how can I help? How can I get something to pass? How can I, can you teach me how to do this? And I took other people's stories, like some of what I shared today, because they didn't want to come in front of the camera today. They didn't want to come in front of the camera the other day. And I said, look, let me be that voice to you. Let me share that story. Let me show you the passion and conviction I have for this community that I love, who accepted me and told me that I can do better and keep me alive to share this with you right now. I think that was like the hard lesson I had to teach myself, that my life is worth living. Something is worth more than my life and taking it away from me. Yeah.
That's such a beautiful message that I'm sorry that you had to go through all that. I'm sorry you had to get to that point. But to reach that point of realizing that you were worth it, and
Yeah.
and to take those steps forward to make your life have meaning for others and to help others. That's a very
Yeah.
beautiful story. Were there other things along that initial period that, you know, we've covered the point where you hit essentially rock bottom, and you made that decision for yourself? What were some of those keys for turning that around and getting to where you are today?
Well, I had to go further down. I had to switch everything around. I had to go to the VA and say, take me off this medicine. I almost killed myself. I did literally try killing myself over the weekend on my birthday. And from there, I did lose the home I was living in. I lost my car. I ended up in the streets. I ended up at the Union stations and riding the buses and sleeping on the parking garage at right by Domino Sugar where I was working. Because the year prior, I switched jobs from the Coast Guard to working, a good paying union job. But it wasn't enough. I was still in deep debt. So, with that, I went back and forth to DC to try to find a president that didn't want us to exist. And I had to prove to myself I lost like 100 pounds. I did every push up and sit up that I could to make sure that I met the female standards because there was no way I was going to meet the male standards anymore. I was fully female. I made sure that I passed and served my country to the best of my ability. I wanted to make sure that I got to my retirement. And then to make sure that no one else was hurt or harmed. But during that same time that I was trying to help others, other people were still being neglected and kicked out because we didn't have the right policies or procedures in place. And it's still one of those things that maybe even, Colonel Bree is part of that success in changing so that, the people in the enlisted side can actually have an opportunity to switch over and join a brand new Space Force.
Mhm.
But right now, even when I wanted to re-enlist, I had to prove who I was. And I was like, I couldn't do that again. I didn't want to put myself in that perspective and harm of having to, be dead named until I was renamed in a new unit or find a new unit that would accept me so that I could go to my 24 or 26 years to serve my country. I decided to then switch it and say, hey, look, there's a political office that I can think about running for. And if everything's correct, I can actually make a big difference because this person is my basically kind of like mortal enemy because he supports President Trump. And here I am, the little small girl who's infantry who has been harmed and has been in the national news and has spoken at the Women's March about getting women to run. Well, I took that time and said, you know what? I need to run for office. And I think the best way that I could do that was doing it myself.
Mhm.
Finding a small team and saying, let me do what I can. Because guess what? I was able to help myself. I was able to help 10 people. I was able to help hundreds of people. I was able to help thousands of people. Now I want to help hundreds of thousands of people by running for office. And that was successful. And I
That's
hope that we can talk more about that.
yeah. Yeah, that's so beautiful. Yeah, I just wanted to bring up right now. I loved when we were talking initially in the pre-interview months ago that when you ran a very small grassroots campaign with under $70,000 worth of funding and came darn close to beating the incumbent. Why don't you tell us the stats of the numbers that he won with over what you had with your small team and that little bit of funding?
Well, I wouldn't say there was a huge margin when it came to the general election because we were also running against Trumpism. But in the primary, I was running against other women. Okay, I think that's where we kind of got mixed up in the pre-interview. I wasn't running against the incumbent at the time. I was running against other women, and I didn't come out with my LGBT status at all. So here I am, Mia Mason, a woman, a veteran, running for our country, congressional office. And, we're out there door knocking and everything else. And then, I get 25,000 votes. They get 20,000 votes, and she gets 14,000 votes. I win the primary, because during the pandemic, it just started. Everything was in lockdown. Nobody could go out and do traditional campaigning. Luckily for me, I was part of a coalition. I was doing all the video tech support for them as well. And I was just able to turn on the lights in the studio and share what we were going through during that lockdown, that pandemic, like every day, every night, and then broadcast my message to all the voters out there on the Eastern Shore, from the little place that I was living. Because guess what? I tried to move during the pandemic and I had to lose a home that I was trying to get. And I was completely unsuccessful. But I was then able to just, be like in a studio and then help others and to listen to other people and then get their message out for them. I continued to do that. I did that for over a year. Even once I won the primary, I continued to do that. And it was very successful, and to the point that, when our LGBTQ chair passed, suddenly I decided that, I think I can help out here in the state of Maryland a little bit more on a niche of being part of the LGBT community myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I now serve as the LGBTQ chair here in the state of Maryland. And I can't wait for Pride Month. We got like another, I wish it was next week.
We'll have to talk. Maybe after the break, we'll have to talk about some of your plans, whatever you can share and divulge at this point, because that'll be very exciting. That is coming up soon-ish. So as we wrap up this section about your transition, what do you feel are some of your favorite things that you have learned, either about yourself or about the world around you, through your transition?
I I think some of the most positive things is that people are accepting of it, depending on where you go and what you are. Um, but the thing is that some of the hardest thing is still family, and friends that are there with you. Or if you're trying to play a sport, are you accepted or not? And then what is the actual technical definition of what is transgender and stuff, and then having to be the teacher. When I was in the military, I had to teach colonels and generals what transgender meant or what it was because they had no idea what it was. It was like everybody who came out as transgender had to teach their commanding officers what transgender was. And we still do that to this day. I spoke at the NGA, I spoke at the VA, I spoke with the Coast Guard, to explain to them what transgender is, how it is, how the process is, and everything else. So all of those years of research and the actual transition process paid off in a way so that I could then teach others about how to transition somebody who is just now coming out.
And my last question for this section, what advice do you have to give young or closeted trans folks out there?
Don't be. If you think that it's in a dark spot where you want to end it all or do something else, try to confide in somebody, trust in somebody, and if you can't trust them, keep trying to find someone that can talk to you. And if that requires you moving or getting on a video game and talking about it, it will allow you to build that confidence so that you have that choice to properly transition. Because even now, We see people who are wanting to transition in the youngest of ages, as young as 3 years old. I remember going to Boston and seeing a 3-year-old who wanted to dance and do ballet like I wanted to do when I was a kid, but now has the opportunity to transition and be who she is at such a young age. And this is, she's so confident about what she is and who she is that she's able to achieve this.
Mm-hmm.
And now she has full state support, federal support, and everything else. And to get that voice from little spot in Boston all the way to Washington, D.C., to then have them also get Laverne Cox to then say, hi, people need to support this bill to support this little girl and the trans men and LGBT non-binary people. I think that was super important to go be part of that process. And I love that. So anybody that thinks that they can't come out can come out, because even when I was in high school, like I was a minority in my high school. I didn't feel comfortable. I felt like I didn't belong. But the second I walked into a school in Virginia Beach from compared to Portsmouth, it was like, oh hey, like come join us. Like you're part of us. I was accepted. Sometimes you just have to go to the right places and find the right people and make the right friends to come out.
That's beautiful advice. Mia Mason, thank you so much for agreeing to come onto the Transgender Show and share so much of your story with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I'm thankful to be here to share with you still.